Welcome to another episode of The Modern Moron, a big intro for a big episode. I'm pretty excited about my guest for a number of reasons. Number one being that I find Larry Dorf to be an extremely entertaining person that I've known for more than 20 years. Did you hear that, Larry? It's a long time. He's a funny guy, and I'm not completely sure that most of the time he's not really trying to be funny. A second reason, probably the main reason, is that Larry is one of the creators, writers, and producers of the Netflix hit, The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window. I feel pretty sure you've at least heard of it, and I'm going to insist that you watch it. It's a great title and a really, really bad hashtag. The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window is a parody, a satire of the suspense thriller novel genre like The Woman in the Window, The Woman in Cabin 10, The Other Woman, and so on and so on. The title alone should let you know something's up with this show. We talk about the fine line of walking between making fun of the genre and dropping in jokes and still honor the genre of a suspense thriller. For example, this series is not like the movie Airplane with gag after gag, where they parodied the disaster film genre back in the 70s and 80s. In an interesting way, a suspense thriller or even a horror movie is not unlike comedy. You have to have a setup where you get the audience to think you're going in one direction, and then the surprising reveal is the punchline of a joke or the scare of a thriller. How do you honor both? I found it to be a very interesting conversation, and I hope you do too. Finally, Larry was on this podcast once before, our most listened to episode, by the way. And I tell him this fact. It was when he and his partners were writing and producing Mike Tyson Mysteries for Adult Swim's Cartoon Network. On that episode, Larry claimed to break the news that the show was not being picked up after its fourth season. Well, we recorded that episode at the end of May 2020, and that information came out in January. So this wasn't exactly a cutting-edge news exclusive. At least we didn't think so. However, apparently it had not been officially announced, and somehow there were a few nerdy news websites that actually cited this podcast. Yes, this podcast to announce its cancellation, thereby explaining the mystery, pun intended, of why that episode had more downloads than any of our other episodes. Now, I don't believe him at first when he tells me this. So Larry proves this to me by sending me a link from his phone to a site called ScreenRant.com that cites the Modern Moron as its news source. How ridiculous is that? This podcast is a news source? Come on, please. I'm just a journalist trying to be true to my craft, okay?
Loser.
But the reason I bring this up is because of how pee in my pants giddy I become over this when I actually read it in disbelief. You can almost hear my ego expanding. So yes, we were cited in the publication Screen Rant, but it also appears in the U.S. Sun, okay? The About page of the U.S. Sun. TheSun.com is a U.S. online edition of The Sun, Britain's largest newspaper. We also appeared in a website called comicbook.com. Or, how about this? A little publication called Newsweek. Ever heard of it? Yes. It has the same quote from Larry and cites the Modern Moron podcast in Newsweek. However, Newsweek did not create a hyperlink where the name is. So, you're on notice, Newsweek. Lawsuit forthcoming. You're going to want to put your best people on this. By the way, Mike Tyson Mysteries, which you can still catch streaming on Hulu, has a 97% positive fan rating on RottenTomatoes.com. Okay, can we please not gloss over that? That is a huge rating from fans. Also, one of the voices of Mike Tyson Mysteries was that of comedian Norm Macdonald, who passed away in September of last year. I asked Larry about working with Norm, and he talks about how the producers of that show, that being Larry, Rachel, and Hugh, valued Norm's opinion on what was funny and how much they wanted Norm to have been able to see their Netflix hit. From all the appearances and interviews of Norm that I watched after he passed, it seemed like across the board, not only did people love him for how genuine he was, but how they valued his unique perspective on comedy and how hearing his laugh was the best compliment of all. So please enjoy this part one episode where I get a little too excited about being mentioned in a website. It's the Larry Dorf from the Netflix hit and terrible hashtag, The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window, and thank you for listening. Wow, I've got Larry Dorf on the line.
Larry Dorf's here. Now, I'm not camera ready, but I'm assuming because of the lines I'm seeing, it's just an audio recording.
That's correct.
That's great. I look great.
I bet you do.
Yeah, I look great, but not quite camera ready. So let me put my ring light on just to...
Oh, you've got a ring light.
Yeah, just to be sure, just in case.
Why do you have a ring light?
Auditions, you know.
Okay, that's legit.
Yeah.
Have you been auditioning for anything lately?
Not much, not a lot.
Commercials?
Some commercials.
Okay.
Some TV stuff.
All right.
But I think I'm done. I think maybe my career is behind me.
That part of your career?
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe the whole thing.
No, come on. Now, I know I've told you this before. The episode I did with you,
okay,
hands down, the most downloaded and listened to episode that I have done.
That's amazing.
You knew that? It is amazing.
Well, you told me that, and I said something on that. Are we in this? We're in, right?
In what?
I mean, we're doing the podcast right now.
We're doing it. Oh, we're doing it. We're doing it right now. You just can't feel it.
Last time I was with you, I was on your show.
Yes.
I broke some news that I didn't really know that I broke. I said that Mike Tyson Mysteries was canceled.
Yes.
And I didn't think anything about it, but it was picked up by several news outlets.
Stop it. Like what?
I don't even remember. I'm so vain. I do
Associated Press, Reuters.
I do a Google alert whenever I'm in the news, and I got a Google alert, a few of them, that it was picked up.
Why does that not surprise me at all?
Maybe it was like, comic book, moron.com or some weird, crazy comic book fan website. Right. But it got picked up.
Well, the thing with Mike Tyson, it's more than it is the cartoon, but that he's an icon, right? He's beyond his sport. He's beyond, he's grown so much.
Yeah.
I just want to say my podcast is so little in the arena of podcasts. I'm going to add not just 3 zeros, but 6 zeros to the numbers I'm going to give you. My second most, that's interesting. This must have changed recently. My second most listened to episode was with Scott Chernoff. Do you remember Scott?
I do, yeah.
You know him?
I mean, I haven't seen him in 20 years, but I remember him from Wows at Groundlings.
Yes. He's the voice of Gearhead on Rick and Morty. That's my second most listened to episode at 280 million downloads.
Okay. That's pretty good.
Number one is you at 343.
Wow.
Like you're far and away. In third place, Will Forte.
Well, nobody likes Will Forte.
I mean, you're beating out Cheryl Hines and Will Forte. How about that?
Wow. So of those 343 million people that listen to my podcast, me being the guest, at least one of them was some news, was in the press or had access to the press.
You mean there was no other way they could have found out? Come on.
No, it's because it quoted. It said from your podcast.
No, it didn't.
I got to find this.
You're foolish. Now you're pulling on my a little bit. Not that I don't appreciate it, but
Larry Dorf.
And I'm thinking, why was this so listened to? Is it A, because Larry Dorf is fascinating and he's associated with Mike Tyson Mysteries on the Cartoon Network? Or could it have been that you had a very interesting inside story about Mike Tyson, who's followed by millions of people?
Maybe.
I think it's the first reason. I think it's that you're fascinating.
See, I'm looking for it now and I can't find it, but
There's no way a news story said, according to this
Yeah,
podcast.
he said it on this podcast.
He said it on his podcast.
Oh, on your podcast.
Okay, now
That's what it said.
I'm starting to feel a little like who's on first.
Well, let me here we go. Ready?
I'm ready.
In a May 2020 podcast interview, you're the only one I did. The world was shut down. Writer Larry Dorf confirmed that the fourth season would be its last.
What are you reading this on the internet?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the website?
Let's see here.
I cannot believe
that hashtag show. There's screenrant.com. Yeah, right here.
Can you send me the link?
Yep. Screenrant.com. Let me send you the link right now.
Please.
This is not going to be fun for your listeners because it's.
Oh, I'll edit this part. I'll edit the time lapse out.
Okay.
It'll be we'll cut it right down, but come on.
There you go.
Okay, I'm waiting for it to arrive.
Texted it.
You texted it. Oh, okay. That's fine. Mike Tyson Mysteries canceled after 4 seasons.
Now, you're the Modern Moron podcast, right?
After 4 seasons, Adult Swim cancels Mike Tyson Mysteries, the animated comedy that follows the retired boxer and his team of mystery solvers. Adult Swim cancels Mike Tyson. Where does it have?
Are you on that thing? Mike Tyson Mysteries?
Yeah, I don't see the Modern Moron anywhere.
Oh. So you have the first paragraph. It's in the second paragraph. After 4 seasons, Adult Swim is canceling Mike Tyson Mysteries on the Modern Moron.
Oh, yeah, my God.
Yep.
After 4 seasons, Adult Swim is canceling Mike Tyson Mysteries on the Modern Moron podcast via comingsoon.net. Never heard of it. Mm-hmm. Staff writer Larry Dorf confirmed the show's cancellation.
Incorrect.
Revealing the decision.
Lazy journalism. I wasn't a staff writer. I was a producer.
You were a creator and producer. Yeah. Excuse me.
Excuse me. Exactly.
Yeah. Cancellation revealing the decision to end the show was made toward the beginning of the year. Well, I was a writer for Mike Tyson Mysteries, said Dorf. Mike Tyson Mysteries is not a show anymore. It's been canceled. It was very fun. It was a funny show, but it's all done. Why is my name not mentioned?
What?
Oh, no.
Loser.
Wow. This right here is the biggest thing to hit this podcast ever. Yeah. That we were quoted by Screen Rant.
Mm-hmm.
What? You've made my day. Huge.
If you put in Google, Larry Dorf, Mike Tyson Mysteries canceled, there's a whole bunch of them.
Larry Dorf.
Because once one site picks it up, you get a million of them.
Mike Tyson canceled.
Mike Tyson Mysteries canceled. There's a bunch of them. There's
actually, Screen Rant. I've heard of Screen Rant. Haven't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Movieweb.com, hitc.com, popculture.com, comicbook.com.
Wow. Since we're talking Mike Tyson Mysteries, which was a great show.
It's actually in the Mike Tyson Mysteries Wikipedia page.
Is it really?
Yeah.
And did you get in any trouble for that?
I didn't get in any trouble. Hugh and Rachel saw it. They joked. I think they passive aggressively joked about it. I don't know what's the secret. What are we doing? Is this,
what are we doing? Thank you. What are we doing?
You know what I mean? Did I reveal a Ukrainian?
That might be too too soon. Too soon for Ukrainian references.
What a moron!
I think we need to get somewhere else. But a door closes and another opens, right?
That's right.
Great show, and I do want to talk about something on the serious side. But I bet you have a great anecdote. Is that you worked with Mike Tyson, right?
Right.
Obviously. Did you ever work with him in person in studio? It was usually he was doing it over a landline or a special.
No, he did. Hugh was the voice director on that. So Hugh, for our listeners, Hugh Davidson.
Right. He would work with Mike.
Yeah, but I was there when I did see Mike record a few times.
In studio, you were there watching him record?
Yeah, sometimes he would do. No, normally he did it in Vegas.
Right.
But he did do it in LA. I remember at least a couple of times, and I was there for some of
But
those.
Hugh had kind of a rapport with him.
Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. You also worked with, and I didn't realize how affected I was by it until he
Mhm.
passed away,
Yeah.
is Norm Macdonald.
Yes.
I mean, when he passed away, I mean, I don't know what to say. I was more, I guess I took him for granted. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah. It was shocking, just shocking. He was, and again, Hugh knows him more than I do, but him, I did spend more time with than I did with Mike Tyson, but
Mm-hmm.
I saw him quite a bit. But he was, yeah, I mean, he was just his own thing. He was hilarious, and he didn't give a shit
Yes.
kind of about anything, but not in a bad way. You hear that, like, oh, he doesn't give
It's
a shit about.
he doesn't give a shit about anything, but he gave a shit about people.
Yes, and I'll give you an example. Like during the records, he wouldn't turn his phone off, and he would answer his phone and have full conversations with whoever was on the other line. Now that might sound like what a dick. He doesn't care about the record.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
He
but also
does.
he was doing a CNN interview on the Canadian CNN,
Hmm.
and Hugh called him, just happened to call him during the interview, and Norm picked it up and talked to Hugh and said, "Oh, I'm in the middle of an interview right now." But he talked to Hugh. He didn't. So it's the same. It doesn't matter if it's who it is. He would just and what he was doing. He just answered his phone. I don't even know if he looked at the caller ID. He just picked it up and took the call. Yeah.
And did you get to ever, I don't know, have lunch with him or anything like that? Any interactions?
I don't
Or
think I
per-
ever had lunch with him. I might have had lunch, but it was at a recording studio. So it's just like,
Mhm.
oh,
Mhm.
let's go eat lunch.
He
But
I feel like
uh-oh, I'm not going
uh,
to answer that call.
oh wow.
I'm not going to answer it.
Wow, that was karma right there.
It really was. It really was.
um Other comedians have said about him, he was the nicest guy.
Hmm.
Y- you felt like you were good friends with him, and yet nobody really knew him because he was kind of an enigma, I guess. He was kind of
Hmm.
aloof, maybe a little aloof. I don't not intentionally to be mysterious. It's just that's
Right.
the way he was.
Right. There would be long stretches of time where you wouldn't hear from him. Um, but so I guess aloof, but also not in a jerky way. I
Yes.
know other people who are aloof, and I would say it's a negative. But for him, yeah, he's hilarious without really trying to be hilarious. He's so unique, or was so unique. He was,
It's almost like his uncensored nature makes him more funny because he's just not going to hold back.
yeah, and I know his opinion when he would laugh at something we wrote. I think that meant more to the three of us than anything else.
Really.
Yeah, like wow, Norm finds this surprising and funny. That's you can't get a better. I couldn't. There's no one who I would rather have that from.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we did this new show, which was on Netflix, and it was a bummer. It would have been. Hugh kept saying, "I bet Norm would have liked this, and I bet Norm would have gotten it." And that was something we really I would have loved to have seen what Norm thought of it.
And you were speaking of the woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window.
That's right.
Well, what a
Yeah,
great segue.
it's
You,
but
it's part of your magic.
it really is. I'm just looking at the clock, and I'm like, we haven't even
Oh,
gotten
we're on a clock. Hey, we're on a clock with Larry Dorf. I thought we had him for the full hour, but he's got to do Jimmy Fallon. Okay, I just needed to let the producers
Yeah,
know.
just let him know. Let him know. Um,
Okay.
I got a guy driving around the block,
Okay.
waiting for me to be done. Um, but the tone of that show, the woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window, it's a unique tone. It starts out very serious, and then there's not a lot of jokes in it, but it gets more and more absurd. And I think half the people got it, and half the people didn't get it.
I have some opinions on it.
Yeah, love it.
Do you want me to throw a couple at you?
Absolutely.
I read some of the reviews. Some are great and some are not so great.
Right.
It's a parody and a satire of the psycho thriller, right? Something like
Yeah, of those movies and books, Girl on the Train, The Woman in the Window. There's a
Mhm.
book called that's going to be made into a show or a movie called Girl in Cabin 10, and they're all about these women that have some tragic past and that led them to drink too much and take pills,
Mhm.
and they witness a murder, but no one believes them because they're an unreliable
It's
witness.
like the Hallmark Channel on Halloween.
Yeah, it's basically like a Rear Window thing, but with these tragic heroines who, no one believes them.
Mhm.
And in the end, they're vindicated. They were right all along.
The challenge to me in watching it, I'm not all the way through, I'm about 4 or 5 episodes in, is
Mhm.
the challenge that you guys faced maybe was how do you let people in on the joke when part of your goal is to make it seem like it's not a joke?
Right.
You take it very seriously. How far do you
Yes.
string the viewer along or tempt them or set up the joke before the punchline?
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing. That was through the writing process. It
Mhm.
was it was just towing this line through the shooting process, through the editing process, especially the editing process. But at one point, Netflix said, "Nah, we can't call it The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window because it's too long of a title." And
But that's the point.
exactly. And then they realized that that is the
Thank
point. And
you.
that
Like
and the
that
title, that's
ridiculous
when
title should tell
it's
you this ain't.
yes, it's ridiculous. It's way too long. And that should tell you there's something here that's a little bit, this is different. It's a funny title because everybody you say that title to laughs.
Yeah.
But then you're right. The show starts and it's very serious.
So
But it's Kristen Bell's playing it so straight
yes.
that absurd things start happening, and they get more and more absurd as you watch. But she's not winking at it, and she's not making a joke about it. And
Right.
there's very few jokes
That's part of the
that
great
are
setup.
there. Yeah,
You can't play it. You can't do it like Airplane.
exactly.
You ever seen a grown man naked?
And maybe one of our first outlines, because we're comedic writers and we come from the groundlings, was more Airplane.
Mm.
And then it was Netflix that said, let's get the viewer to, if it's too comedic up front, no one's really going to invest in the mystery. And let's get them to invest in the mystery and do sort of a slow burn with the comedy.
That's interesting. And you guys heard that and went,
Yeah.
"Oh, now that's you were on board with it."
We heard that. We
Push back a
mulled it
little?
over a lot.
Okay.
I don't know if we pushed back. Their notes were very productive.
Hmm.
And they didn't have very many notes. I think they were
Wow.
very smart.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so it's like, let's give this a chance because it makes sense. That does make sense. It was just a balancing act of how much comedy should there be, and we cut a tremendous amount of comedy from it.
Really? Visual
Yeah,
or in the writing or both?
Both. I guess I'm speaking more in like the editing.
Okay.
Than
So
the
you
writing,
had it
definitely.
in case you needed it, but then you ended up not using it.
Yeah, and there's a few things that I kind of regret we cut a little too much of.
Mhm.
One scene, I don't know if you've even seen it yet. No, you haven't gotten into it. So I don't want to, spoil
No
it.
spoilers.
No spoilers. But yeah, there's a few things that I think we could have taken it a bit further. But
I think by the 4th or 5th episode, you had enough actors show up that you've seen before, that
right,
like the guy that played, I can't think of his name, I'm terrible. The guy that played the lighthouse,
yeah,
like
Mark Evan Jackson.
yes, who was on Brooklyn Nine-Nine and tons
Right.
of other stuff.
Yeah,
But I want to give you my theory though on the people, the reviewers who possibly gave it a negative review.
yeah,
Some of the people who maybe gave a negative review, I would suggest that some of those viewers either A, they didn't get the joke, or more likely, they didn't get the joke until further along. And when they realized they kind of missed part of the joke, they got pissed off and resentful and
Mhm.
wrote a negative review.
I agree with you. I think some people felt like the joke was being played on them.
Yes. And I'll show you.
I
I'll
think-
give you a big thumbs down.
Yeah, I think some people were saying pick a lane, either be a comedy or be a thriller. You can't be, or a mystery. You can't be both.
But that's the whole.
And
That's
we-
the.
we-
You've got to walk
we
that
did pick
line.
Yeah, we did pick a lane, and our lane was to do both.
Good. Because if you do one, it's sort of like I said, it's Airplane, or it's more Mel Brooks type thing, or
Yeah.
maybe it's what Scream. What was the parody of the horror film?
Yeah, there's like not another teen movie.
Yeah,
and
it's so far in your cheek, tongue in cheek, that you can't sustain it for a limited series. It's just gags.
Right. And this will be just a one. It'll stay as a limited series. I'm breaking that story because I always break a little story on your podcast, but this will stay as a limited series because part of the charm of this show was, I don't know if you call it charm is the right word, but part of the excitement around it was, what is it?
Yes.
And if you do another one, people are going to be ahead of it. There's no way to do that again.
It hasn't run its course yet. It started out super hot, but it hasn't run its course yet. So we don't want to give away too much, right?
Right, because it does get more absurd, and there's the end is kind of crazy.
Okay.
So I don't want to give that away, but
great.
I got on my Instagram, I got a direct message out of the blue from Amy Schumer, who I don't know Amy Schumer.
Mm-hmm.
But Amy Schumer direct messaged me and said, your show is hilarious. And that meant the world to me, because it was like, I don't know her. I've never met her, but I respect her.
How'd she get your number?
I think she just looked it was on my instant. Did I say instant messenger? I meant Instagram. God, I'm so old. Did I say instant messenger?
What a loser.
Of us is very old. And then Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Jesus.
It was on Instagram.
She looked me up in the phone book.
What?
No, she went on my Instagram.
Okay.
And she direct messaged, on the direct, I don't know.
I'm familiar with it somewhat. I don't have Instagram. I barely have Facebook, but I get it.
Yeah. But and then she just said that, and she just left me that message. And it was amazing. It was amazing to hear, like,
from a peer,
someone
that you didn't really know.
I mean, she's not even a peer. She's like she's done it. She's way more than a peer.
Yeah.
But she's, liked it enough to reach out, and she totally got it, which just meant, okay, well, people with a certain sensibility, and I think that sensibility is kind of who we were going for.
Yeah.
Those people did get it. And that is what we're so hoping to get, because we were developing this. We had already shot it. I guess we already had shot it before Norm died. So that was what we were hoping to get.
You wanted his blessing. That would have been, I don't need anybody else's blessing if I have Norm's.
Right. Yeah.
Where did you shoot? Very beautiful backdrop.
We shot it, the exteriors of the houses and the street. That was in Pasadena.
Okay.
This beautiful part of Pasadena.
Beautiful homes back there.
Beautiful homes. And these homes in this neighborhood, they have these peacocks. And peacocks are just beautiful, beautiful, big birds, colorful.
Mm-hmm.
So you think, I could imagine someone touring a house there and seeing this neighborhood with these gorgeous peacocks and saying, it's paradise. I want to move in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize that peacocks make the world's worst noises. They're terrible. It sounds like a dying cat, and they do it all day and all night.
Oh.
And they're huge, and they and they're like up in trees making big noises, and
do they fly? Can they fly?
I guess they get up in trees, so I guess they could fly a little bit.
Like limited flight.
Yeah, I guess.
Wow.
They're enormous.
They're big birds.
But,
What's with all the birds?
there was so many bird sounds.
Oh, really?
Cut out.
They wouldn't
Yeah.
hold for.
The birds didn't hold.
What about the scene at the lighthouse? The lighthouse scene. Where was that?
The lighthouse?
Yeah.
That was in Palos Verdes. There's a lighthouse there.
Okay.
But the problem with that lighthouse is there's palm trees all around it.
Yes.
There's red tile roofs on it.
What's wrong with the red tile roof for the?
Because the whole show takes place in the East Coast, takes place in New Hampshire.
Okay.
And so our visual effects people just took all that stuff out.
Wow.
There's no palm trees in the entire show.
Wow. There's a lot of palm trees in Pasadena.
Yeah.
Just lifted them out.
And there's a grocery store scene. Oh, you haven't gone there yet. You haven't done your homework. So
this gets me to a question that maybe you can't answer.
Yeah.
Because the setup is very careful, and it's better to err on the side of too much setup than not enough. Because you want to set up, like Netflix said, you want to make sure to set up the suspense part.
Right.
What was was there a real tip-off in the first episode? I felt like there wasn't. Maybe there was, and I missed it.
You know, in the first episode,
Mhm.
and then we could have gone, this is one that it could have gone a little further. When Anna goes across the street, they have dinner in the backyard.
Yes.
And we open up on a scene. They're in the backyard. He's like, "Do you want to stay for dinner?" And they're all laughing, which is such a lame,
cliched
thing.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, it's like good. They're having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
But
this is going to lead to something.
We had takes where they were laughing for such a long period of time. Like it went on way too long that it was clear we're making a joke. And we went back and forth with that. And I bet that could have been a little bit longer.
That's a hard thing to gauge when literally how many times in the editing room did you watch that scene?
So many times. I mean,
you lose track of like how many times have we watched it? Is this too much?
Right.
Is it not enough? Wow.
Yeah. But then when Anna, she puts the kid to bed and she comes down and Tom says, I scrubbed your dish. It's a gorgeous dish. And then their fingers kind of touch.
Yes.
You know, and music. You know, I think that's supposed to be kind of crazy. And then it drops. You know, that's another broken casserole dish. So you get 3 broken casserole dishes in the first episode.
Okay.
And, you know, none of this is laugh out loud stuff. But then they're on the, you know, it seems like, are they going to kiss? And you know, she says, like, I should go. And he says, it's a go. He turns around. He says, you know, thank you for everything. And it's just too dramatic.
Yeah.
And it's just too much. And it's just, you know, it was supposed to give you that feeling of that it's just too much.
Yeah. I still didn't get it.
It's not a laugh. You wouldn't laugh at it.
Mm-hmm. But it makes you scratch your head.
Yeah.
That's what I was doing. It took me, I think it was the second episode, and I'm not going to ruin this, but I do, when they allude to the daughter.
Right.
And what happened to her. And then I'm like, okay, because for me, I'm not only watching the show, I'm watching Hugh, Rachel, and Larry.
Yeah.
And I watched the first episode and I'm like, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Uh-huh.
Maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. And then finally, when we go to, you know, the retelling of the story, the flashback, and it was take your daughter to work day.
Yeah.
Then I was just laughing and I said, now that's Hugh, Rachel, and Larry.
Right.
It was so great. And then I was like, okay, I'm on board. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the first real?
I bet that's the first real one. And I bet maybe we should have had one in episode 1.
Really?
Maybe.
But it might get people to watch it a second time.
Right.
What did I miss the first time?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I went on Rotten Tomatoes and looked at some of the reviews, the good and the bad. And I read the bad. I stand by my opinion that some of these reviewers didn't catch on early enough. And then when they were told, they felt insulted. Like I'm usually smarter than the room. And so I'm just going to give it a bad review. I think they're sour grapes dickheads. That's what I would classify them as. What was my point? Oh, you said you should have put a gag or something more obvious in the first episode. And I don't think so. You guys really had a challenge. I think you pulled it off.
Well, thank you. And then in the first episode, I don't know if you caught this, but the gravestone, I think she's gone to the cemetery twice now. And that gravestone, it says something different.
The second time?
Yeah. I don't know if you caught that.
Really? No. I of course I'm kind of gullible.
I'm stupid.
Kind of.
Yeah. It says something different. And that's a little bit of a tip off. And then also in episode 1, actually, when she goes upstairs to get her paint supplies.
Mm-hmm. In the attic?
And there's in the attic,
Yes.
and there's books. There's 3 books, and she's kind of touching them nostalgically. And the names of the books are ridiculous. It's I think you too can be an artist. You also can be an artist.
Yes, I think I
Anyone.
remember that. The 3 titles were
Yeah.
basically the same thing.
Right. And just the way she's also looking at her painting, and she's like, I was so talented.
What happened?
And the painting's not that great.
Yeah.
It's just too much.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess those are the
Here's
kind of the signal that something's she's taking herself way too seriously in a funny way, but playing it super, super straight.
What about this in the future as a binge watch? That there will be binge watching parties where you guys will have a list, or somewhere available there will be a list of all the gags and clues, and it could either be a drinking game or some other kind of game where you can score points by catching the clues. And the clues are not necessarily towards the murderer or if there's a murderer. It's just, did you catch a gag? What about that? Yeah. What do you think?
That is great. I probably wouldn't take the time to, I wouldn't remember what all the things are, and I don't have any desire to watch it again, but someone should do that.
Someone should do that. Or I'm hearing Q right now, listening to this episode and saying, that is a terrible idea. That's a terrible idea. Can you picture him? That is the worst idea I've ever heard. Turn on the Spurs.
Rain, come again another day. All the family wants to play. Rain.
Well, there you have it. You know how movies many times have product placement in them and the production company can make a little money? Well, this production had to have Corningware as a major donor because there was a shitload of casserole dishes in this production, most of them broken. Also, you're the first to hear the bombshell that the woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window is done. It was a limited series with no season 2. I wonder if part of the allure they were going for included calling it season 1. Mysterious. How cool was the Amy Schumer story? I wonder if she would do this podcast just to talk about Larry's show. I mean, this podcast is a news source now, so she's bound to listen to it. How could she avoid it? In part 2, we talk about what the promotion process was like in terms of doing interviews before the show was released. They actually had to be coached on how to handle certain questions like a politician. Also, what it was like shooting a production on location during the COVID pandemic. We talk about one of the executive producers for the series, which was Will Ferrell. And there's an interesting story there. So there are many reasons to tune in to part 2 with Larry Dorf and the woman in the house across the street from the girl in the window. And thank you for listening.
Anna, I'm not sure you remember me. Eileen? Our daughters were in the same class.
Oh, yeah. Eileen, nice to see you. That was really touching what you said about your brother.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was, hard to say.
Yeah. These things are hard to talk about.
Oh, no, I meant the words. Autoerotic asphyxiation. It's literally hard to pronounce.